there's a time period where, like my guaranteed pay didn't cover all my expenses. And I think the Diaz's are going to go down in history more than any other guys, Connor, anybody.
All right, guys. Like I said on the show today, I have UFC legend Gray the Bully Maynard. Gray, how you doing today?
Doing good. Doing good.
That's good to hear, man. I want to thank you so much for coming on. I know you're a busy guy, always training and whatnot. I appreciate you coming on.
No problem, man. Glad to be here.
So the first thing that I'm always curious about when you're talking to not only just a fighter, but you're talking about a extremely high level fighter, and you're also pretty decorated as an amateur wrestler. What was the difference between you competed at Michigan State as a wrestler? So what was the difference between competing at a high level for wrestling and then stepping into the octagon, having the door locked behind you and standing across from another human being wanting to inflict damage on you? So what was that kind of difference in feeling?
Yeah. It's not that different, to be honest. Amateur wrestling, you put in the time, you put in the training to become the best, and you're going out there, against another man. Yeah, maybe it's more points, but it's still a brawl. It's still going out there, and you got to be in shape. You got to be on weight, and to be honest, wrestling probably took more of a toll on my body than MMA ever did.
That's crazy to hear.
Um, yeah, I mean, wrestling is maybe gymnastics just because they start that young and their body gets like, it's terrible for your body, gymnasts. But wrestling is probably one of the toughest sports, hands down across the board. Just because, you look at a college year and you're weighing in 2 times, you're wrestling sometimes even 10 times a week, tournaments, I could have had eight matches plus a couple dual meets. It's a grueling sport. It really is, and you got to love it. You really do. MMA, you're obviously getting paid, not much, but you're getting paid, you're getting compensated. But with wrestling, it's you got to love it. And if I tell anybody, put your kid in a sport, it's wrestling. It teaches them about their body, teaches them how to walk out there alone, right? Instead of a whole team behind you. It teaches you a lot about life.
Yeah, and I think that goes right to like when you see someone that's like hardworking and grinding. Usually they have some kind of amateur wrestling background because, I'm a big time football guy, but football can't relate in that aspect of you just have to be something kind of different to be like an MMA fighter or a wrestler. Because listen, at the end of the day, if you get knocked out, if you get pinned, put on your back, in wrestling I can't blame anybody else. I can only blame me. In football,
Yeah.
I can be like, oh, my offensive line didn't block. My receiver didn't catch the ball. Well, if
Yeah.
you go out and get pinned, man, that's on you.
Yeah. Yeah. Like all the football players, used to come by or whatever, and we're at a Big Ten school and they're looking at us like we're nuts. Like they would watch our practices and just like, you guys are insane, like, why do you do this? And, again, it teaches kids like what you put in is what you get out, and there's nobody here to pick up the slack. There's nobody here to to co-sign on your excuses, if it doesn't go the way that you want it to. And if you start early, you start understanding that,
Sure.
that process is like, and sometimes we get a little too overboard with like hard work. We don't realize like, hey, okay, I might be breaking my body down a little bit. Now it's starting to get more into a lot of the athletes are just more prepared to compete now.
And I definitely agree with that. We're just getting a little bit smarter as human beings. We're getting a little bit better at technology. Because like
Right.
even look at the UFC welterweight champ, Kamaru Usman. He's saying like his knees are shot. You know what I mean? When he was on
Yeah.
Rogan's podcast, he's not that old of a guy, and it's just
Yeah.
wrestling wears you down.
Wrestling wears you down. And, again, we got caught up in the work ethic, because you had Iowa, Dan Gable, and it just pays off,
Sure.
right? If you put in that hard work, but, there's also smarter ways to do it to get the same results, to get but not get broke down.
Sure. And
Right.
like when I had Kenny Monday on a few weeks ago, he was talking about between the 92 Olympics and the 96 Olympics, he didn't wrestle for, 2-3 years because his body just
Yeah.
couldn't, you know what I mean? It was one thing after another.
Yeah.
And it's that kind of thing. Once you start to get into those, peak times when like, you're in the Olympics or
Yeah.
whatever, it's just when your body's just starting to quit on you.
And a lot of the research is done on like triathletes, runners, because that's all measurable,
Sure.
right? You can measure how quick he ran. Wrestling isn't measurable, it's just how good. So we would try to take a lot of that research and apply it to us, which it worked in some ways, but at the end goal is always doing the less you can to get the most you can, just in anything, right? In business, whatever you have to do is just be efficient as possible with your training, trim the fat, and get the most you can, right?
Yeah, that
and
makes a lot of sense.
and coming out is sounds like, oh well, he doesn't believe in hard work. No, that's all still hard work. It's just knowing when to back off, when to pull back, when to let your body heal, recover, and then you got to go to the well again,
Well, it's the whole, idea of would you rather work hard or would you rather work smart? You know what I
Right.
mean? I'm not afraid to work hard, but if I can work smart and make the, you know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
just better.
Well, just putting the hard work into where it needs to count. What like our human body is amazing, but it has limits,
Sure.
and you have to be careful of those. Our mind, it doesn't have limits. We can push it as hard as we want, but the body does, and we gotta, um, you know, be sure we understand them, and each person is different.
Absolutely. And, I just found out last Friday I'm having a son. So I'm having my first kid.
Okay, congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. And, I'm a big time, sportsman, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I like wrestling. I like jiu-jitsu. Do you feel like, because MMA is getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Do you feel like jiu-jitsu and like wrestling at a young age would complement each other? Because there's a lot of similarities, but there's also a lot of differences. As a
Right.
wrestler, you want to go belly down. As a jiu-jitsu
Right.
guy, you never want to go belly down. Um,
Yeah.
you feel like those two would blend together well?
Yeah. Yeah. Um, Definitely complement each other. And you start to understand the differences of going belly down and, you know, what sport goes where. But, I think jujitsu could actually help with a guy trying to compete at a high, because it changed up like my game as well. Like once I started getting into jujitsu was, a lot of the scrambling, a lot of not being afraid to roll to my back. It just helped in a lot of areas, to scramble and to, to feel comfortable in a couple bad spots.
So one thing you alluded to earlier, and it was actually my next question, so segues pretty well, is what is your opinion on fighters' pay? Because if people aren't aware, it's usually like a 50-50, 50 to show percent, 50% if you win.
Yeah.
Like I like the idea of, hey, you're encouraging the person to win. But at the same time, man, a lot of crap can happen. You know, we've seen umpteen horrible decisions, and the idea
Right.
that's costing you half the money. And
Right.
it's the idea that you guys are, like you said, the human body has limits. You have a shelf life as a fighter. And
Right.
you hear guys starting off, 10-10, 8-8,
Yeah.
and it's just,
Yeah.
it makes my stomach hurt that
Yeah.
you guys are doing this, risking your bodies, modern day gladiators for
Yeah.
practically nothing.
And there's a time period where, like my guaranteed pay didn't cover all my expenses, for camp. And I was 8-0 at the beginning, going through all these guys, and I was trapped into a 9-fight contract. And you know, this the problem that I see is they're getting a fight no matter what. And they own the rights to it. They own everything to it.
Sure.
Now you're just giving them half because he lost. Yeah, we get paid probably at the most, I think 19% of what they make, which is pretty low.
Yeah.
So, and the bigger the sport gets, the more people kind of understand like what's going on. And, I really feel like it's going to change.
I really do hope so, because we look at the collective bargaining agreements in like the NFL, and it's pretty close
Yeah.
to a 50-50 split. And then you say
Yeah.
right there at the high end,
Yeah.
19%.
19%.
I mean, it's so frustrating. And like you just talk about
Yeah.
like, baseball, dude. People are signing $250 million deals.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, Edson Barbosa's kicking Terry Ettman's head off, and what's he walking away with? 10 grand?
If
Like,
that.
oh, it's tough to
And
watch.
then, yeah, it's just, and then we got like, we just got bought out, or they got bought out by Endeavor. And, we got, and I might be wrong on this, but a lot of people who put in a bunch of money into it, actors and pro NFL, like a bunch of athletes, and all these people are protected by, uh, they're protected by unions and a lot of different stuff, but they're getting paid out on, our blood, our sweat, our tears.
That's why I'll always respect somebody who, whether it was Ally Quinta or, Nick and Nate Diaz have had their issues where they're like, listen, man, I'm not fighting for free. Like,
Yeah.
it's my body. Like, and, Dana will argue it doesn't move the needle and whatnot. Dude, like, you're putting a price tag on someone's, CTE and whatnot. And it's just, I would
Yeah.
love to see you guys just get paid more. It's tough.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot of stuff that's kind of happening, and it's on its way, I think.
I hope so. And to kind
Yeah.
of go along with that is how much money did, not only you, but fighters that lose when you guys went from your own sponsorships, like your own banner, your own trunks, to Reebok?
Yeah. Um, it just kind of all depends on like where you're at, in the pecking order. The top guys probably got hurt the most. They got hurt pretty bad. Bottom guys, I mean, prelims and stuff, you might have made like 5 to 10 grand. Um, you know, I think that when you start out with the Reebok deal, you're at 2,500. So that's about right. As you get more fights, you kind of move up. Um, I was at around 15.
Yeah.
I was
I mean,
about to get like 20 fights in the UFC, and then after that, you jump up, I guess.
well, like,
But it
I
all
think it was
deals on like,
Vitor
yeah.
Belfort said he was losing six figures,
Oh yeah,
off of,
easy.
and oh my
The top
goodness.
guys. The top guys, like when I fought for, a couple of the pay-per-view, um, kind of main event, on pay-per-view, um, I was making more in sponsors than I was getting paid. You know, yeah,
I mean, if you don't realize there's a problem with the pay scale just based on that, then I
yeah,
don't know what else to tell you.
yeah.
What,
So
what do you think about how the UFCs continue to have cards going on with this whole pandemic? As a fan, I like watching it. I mean, I'm a huge UFC
yeah,
fan. But what do you think as somebody that's in the game? How do you feel about that?
again, it goes back to unions and stuff. We don't have anybody to kind of stand up for us. I'm not saying it's wrong. They have to make money, and it's not because he's trying to help everybody to work. He's trying to help the people that are in charge of the company.
Mm-hmm.
But in but he is helping, a lot of people keep busy to make paychecks, and to keep going. So it's a double-edged sword. I feel like if they're taking all the precautions, it's not bad. But you know, it's not because he wants to help people or help
Yeah,
fighters.
and you're right. The double-edged
So
sword's a great analogy. We saw Jacare at the event at Wands, just, oh yeah, you have the, coronavirus. And then
yeah,
I was listening to Aljamain Sterling speak, and his girlfriend, I think, had it, and she was pretty sick, and whatnot. And he was like, well, if they would have offered me the title fight, I had to take it just because, it was
yeah,
quadruple my pay as normal. It just, again, to go back to that pay, man, like that sucks that you're going like, listen, I'm probably going to be okay if I contract this, virus. But
yeah,
I might not be. But listen, man, I'm running out of money.
yeah,
That's tough, bro.
yeah. It is tough, and I don't know what's going on with all the other pro sports, but it's probably where um, they're having like people talk on the behalf of the players, and kind of negotiating how this needs to work. But it's not like that. It's just like, hey, this is going to happen, and whoever wants to take this, can take it. We're going to throw a little bit of money at you, and there's not a lot of guys who can hold out. Like there could never really be a strike in MMA because I mean, who can really hold out? You know,
Yeah, like your top 1%, maybe. Like
maybe.
your McGregor, who's
Yeah,
making money some other different ways too. But how many Conor McGregors are there? There's one.
yeah.
So
Whereas like this NFL, they strike, and everybody could do it.
sure, sure. Um, what is the worst part about being a fighter?
The pay.
Besides the pay.
um, the worst part about it is probably making weight.
What did you normally like when you were, fighting Frankie Edgar for the title? What were you walking around at like at the start of your camps?
20 to 25 pounds over,
Now that
maybe
coming in that week,
30
what were you at?
pounds. 15
That's still,
to
man,
20.
it's not fun.
Yeah. Yeah. You cut down, but it definitely gets easier as you do it more and you get more dialed in. Um, again, it's trying to do it as smart as possible, right? And the more dumb ways you do it, the more you understand, like, okay, I don't want to do it that way anymore.
What do you think about when you hear somebody like, Joe Rogan's a big proponent of, hydration test. Now, you'd have to do it in an extremely strict way because it's easy to manipulate a hydration test. What do
Right.
you think about that? So we see some fighters like, because you think about 10 years ago, Anthony Johnson was fighting at 170.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
155. He was supposed to be 155, but he couldn't make it a couple times.
So big.
Yeah.
So what
Um,
do you think about that?
I know that I think ONE FC started doing that.
Hmm.
Rich Franklin, he probably kind of headed it out, um, kind of headed it up too, because he works over there now. But they were doing it. They still are. I know a couple people who are over there, and you know, as an athlete, they definitely love it. You know, um, it's if you're doing it smart, which I would say there's only about 10% of the athletes to do it smart, because you know you got to do research, you got to get coaching. um, you know, if you can get meal prep, there's a lot of different ways, you know, to make it better. And you know, a lot of guys can't afford that, you know. So I really feel like there's probably about 10%, maybe 20% who are doing it right. And you know, it takes a toll on your body long term, your kidneys, your liver. You know, dehydration is bad for your brain, you know, and then we're talking about brain health with like going in there and getting punched. Oh, okay. Um, you know, again, it's trying to get out of the box a little bit and create like new ways to do stuff. But why would the UFC do that when they're trying to get out of the box and try to create ways to make more money?
Sure.
That's the whole that's the whole point of a big business is, you know, like we already did this PI. They're kind of talking about the performance like institute, where you know I feel like it was cool, but you know, again, it doesn't go back to the guys. It goes to trying to understand training in the sport, right? Trying to control the training as well. Because if you understand it, now you can control it a little bit more,
Sure.
you know, and all the coaches are really smart over there. The people are great, but you know, all the higher ups are trying to control the sport more, you know, and trust me, they're getting a ton of data, they're getting a ton of information, and you know, like knowledge is power.
Yeah, you're definitely right about that, and it's just it's interesting. Like, part of it, I get the idea of, hey, making weights part of your job. I do
Right,
understand that, but at the same
right.
time, like, it's just I don't want to see somebody killing themselves to try to make a weight class. You know what I mean? Like, is that worth it when you're
Yeah,
seeing these guys just suck this unbelievable amount of weight? Like when you saw McGregor at 145, looked like
yeah,
he's knocking on death's door. You know what I mean?
yeah. Well,
I
they're
don't
not
think.
trying to kill themselves to make a weight. They're trying to make a living. That's
Sure.
why they're trying to kill themselves,
Sure.
you know. And that's where it all comes, you know, like into it is, you know, everybody's trying to make a living and trying to especially when you're getting paid show money and win money. It's like, fuck, you know, I might have to drop down, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
You're trying to get that win bonus.
That's true, and that's it's a real tough place, rock and a hard place to
Yeah.
be in. So, we've talked about the violence of the sport. How do you feel like the day, 2 days, 3 days after a fight? Like when you get into like a 5-round war, how
Yeah.
how do you feel?
You know, it all depends. There's been a couple times when, you know, it took me a day or two, but then there's a couple times where it took me 2 weeks, you know, um, broken hand, bruised eyeball, you know, just a lot of different stuff, peeing blood, whatever it is. Um, yeah, it just all depends on like, you know, and then you got the leg kicks. Leg kicks, people don't understand how like Might not hurt as bad like at the time if there's one or two, but you feel them for weeks.
Well,
Especially if it's a good one.
when Aldo was getting ready to fight McGregor, it was MMA Fighting did a real cool piece about Jose Aldo's leg kicks, and
Yeah.
Uriah Faber was like literally my legs like didn't heal for a year after
Yeah.
he kicked me, you know what I mean? And it's that kind of thing where you're like, oh my God, like that kind of soft tissue damage that he did by driving his shin into your quads over and over is just
Yeah.
insane.
Yeah. It's bad, man. It's tough. But yeah, if it's a good fight, a proper fight, then it's a couple weeks. It's kind of equivalent to a car wreck, a pretty good car wreck.
That's tough, man. I'm sure you get asked this a lot, but kind of just describe what was going through your head maybe that night or, the day or two after when you fought Frank Edgar for the second time. And I don't think I've ever seen a fighter hurt worse in a round and the fight not get stopped than Frankie in the first round. And you were so close, and that fight ended up being a draw. Just describe you were so close of
Right.
reaching this huge monumental goal. I'm sure it'd be a pay bump for you. How do you feel about that?
Round one, it was really, you kind of thought that it was all locked up, and the adrenaline's going, and you're just trying to end it, and he did a great job staying in there. I do remember, like at the end of that, they counted like 100 power punches, and back to my corner, and it was just pins and needles all over the place, just because like uh, the adrenaline, it's basically like sprinting as hard as you can, as as hard as you can, right off the gate, like in a marathon. you know,
Sure.
it's like, oh, I'm on or like I'm at 5 miles and I still have 20 or 18 to go.
Yeah.
You know, um, so I remember going back to the corner and just pins and needles and just like, oh my God, how am I going to go 4 more rounds? Like I just blew my wad. And so round two, I went out and he got his wits about him, and I kind of pulled back just because I had to recover,
Yeah.
just in case like it went the full distance, which it did. He won round two, and it was just that one round. Like I had to kind of have a little bit of a pace, and then round three, I pushed it again. Felt like I won that one. Round four, he might have won. I can't remember.
The idea is like again, kind of talk about the scoring system in MMA. It's kind of
Yeah,
broken. The idea that like that's a 10-8, if not a 10-7 round in round one. Like when you have someone
yeah,
hurt for not only like, oh, you had him hurt at the end of the round, like you had him hurt
yeah,
for 3.5 minutes where like he's
yeah,
literally hitting the deck. He's clearly just on wobble legs. And you go,
yeah.
okay, yeah, you won that round. Well, that's different than him winning round two. Yeah, he won round two, but those aren't the same rounds.
Why are they doing a 10-point, right? When there is no such like as a 10-7 round. I've
Yeah,
never even heard of a 10. I've never heard of it,
yeah.
like in
I
MMA. But then you watch boxing, like Juan Miguel or Juan Manuel, I think Marquez against Pacquiao.
mhm.
He dropped Pacquiao. No. Pacquiao dropped him like 3 times in round one. He got a 10-7
Yeah.
or 10-6.
Mm-hmm.
And then Juan Manuel, he came back the whole fight. like won a bunch of rounds, made up for the difference, but still brought it to a draw. Like,
Sure.
okay, I can understand that, but there are no 10-7 rounds. I've never heard of them.
Yeah, who was it, man? Oh my goodness, it was at the card they just had the pay per view. It was a real good jiu-jitsu match. The guy kept taking him down, was just passing his guard. I mean, lighting him up, just
Right,
absolute dominance for literally 14 minutes. Because it might have
right,
took him 20 seconds each round to get him down. Just
yeah,
submission after submission, just blow after blow. And it's like, oh, they gave him 10-8 rounds. Like, how is
yeah,
that not more than a 10-8? Like, I mean, don't
yeah,
get me wrong, he won, 30
yeah,
24 or whatever, but it's still the idea of going, there
yeah.
has to be more than this.
And just tell us, like, there are no 10-7 rounds,
Yeah,
and then, um, you know, but that would probably, but then it would play into your mind, like, okay, I did enough for a 10-8 round. I'm good.
sure,
you
sure.
know, so it's, no, there's a lot of broken stuff in MMA, and obviously it's a new sport, compared to all the other sports. So there still needs to be some kinks worked out just across the board.
And it's also like I'm not opposed to doing, if a round is not a ton of action, it's kind of more of a feeling out process. I'm fine with a 10-10 round. Like, why give it? Why do you have to give it to
Yeah,
somebody?
yeah,
I don't
I
really, I don't
agree.
understand.
Agree.
Here's a
Flipping a coin, you're flipping a
yeah,
coin, and you're costing a person a paycheck.
absolutely. And
That's
again,
what
we
you're
go back to
doing.
that money.
Yeah, yeah,
How's training changed for you from when you came in? You kind of came in on the real big, like, spike as far as MMA, like when it really started getting big, and it was kind of reckless. I'm sure you heard about some of these sparring sessions in the gym where it was, better than the fights you'd see on TV.
yeah,
How has training changed? How have you guys started tapering down? Like, we talked about the performance
yeah,
institute that UFC has, but not everyone
yeah.
has access to that necessarily. So, how have you seen some of, your friends in the fight game and your coaches work with you guys?
And that's kind of how it was back in, you know, '08, '09, 2010 was, I would spend a ton of money on my camps because I wanted to bring in people. I wanted to understand, like, how to do this better because I had already been through college, wrestling, grinding. It's not like I'm just starting up this sport. And I knew that there was coaches, and athletes who helped all the guys peak, and those were the coaches who did good. Those were the athletes who did good. And just knowing that um, I want to be oh, I'm trying to be a Porsche. I'm not like a Dodge work truck, right? Just just going in, work, 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 work. I want to be a race car. And you watch those. If you watch a NASCAR driver, he's taking a couple laps, warming up, adjusting tires, adjusting the engine, a couple more laps, adjust this, adjust that. And that's how training really needs to be. Yeah, there's a couple times we need to redline it and check how it drives, but you know, every day you can't redline that, tear the that's like going out on NASCAR and he's practiced driving, you know, like a bat out of hell.
Sure.
He'll get fired. Like, dude, this is a $1 million car. Get out of here. Do that on race day, and that's what I was trying to get to, was hiring these coaches to help me um, be prepared and to have a longer career. And uh, back then it was still there was a lot of coaches. Athletes were interested, but they were scared, because all the coaches are like, no, work harder, work harder, longer, longer, harder, because we had a lot of boxing coaches who came over, um, a lot of jujitsu coaches, I just didn't really feel like that was the way to get in to peak.
Sure.
And so you know, just back then I was banging my head up against the wall, but now a lot of the stuff is coming around because you know we're getting more educated people in to coach. We're getting more educated people in because money's there now,
Sure.
right?
Sure.
Jobs are there. Like educated people aren't going to do anything, for no money. Like, hey, come teach us all this stuff. How much you going to pay me? We don't have anything. But that's why, yeah, but that's why, like, I would pay, a lot of money for, a training camp. Walking into my Edgar fight, I was only guaranteed like 26 grand. And I probably spent 20 20 to 25 on my camp, just on my camp, just on the coaching. And then you take taxes, you
Yep.
take, all that stuff. Like, now I'm paying the fight.
Jeez.
Now, obviously I didn't just make that,
But
it was,
still,
yeah, but that was my guaranteed money.
like, what if you went out there and got starched in 30 seconds? They're not throwing you any extra money. They're like, ah, man, sorry, Gray.
They probably would have threw a little bit of extra money just because, you know, um, you're on a pay-per-view event and you'd probably like lose your mind if they didn't. But guaranteed, it was nervous walking out there. Like, oh shit, I'm like I'm in the hole
Yeah.
right now.
Yeah, that's definitely something where
Yeah,
you're trying to fight and claw your way, and that's why you see so much more talking in MMA, man. People saw, a Diaz, a McGregor talk a lot, and it started bumping their pays up. So you see like Colby Covington, you see like Henry Cejudo, talking a little bit
yeah,
more, and some of it's kind of cringeworthy because they're just not naturally charismatic people, but they're just
yeah,
trying to do whatever they can. So Ariel Wani has them on the MMA Hour. You know what I mean? It's doing
yeah,
what you can.
yeah, yeah. I mean, you know, um, do what you got to do, I guess. You know,
Yep,
that's not the way that that's not the way I wanted to do it.
sure.
I wanted to do it like in the cage, and hindsight, it might be wrong, but uh, you got to live with that personality you created.
You
You
got to
know,
live with that far past your fighting days.
yeah,
And then part of like MMA goes back to that culture of respect. Like true MMA is, like if you go to I've trained jiu-jitsu, I've trained MMA, I've trained boxing, and like you go in there and there's this amount of respect because no matter how bad you are, like, you know what I mean? You can be a big tough guy and beat up everybody in that gym. There's always somebody who can get you. So
yeah,
it's that idea, man. If you're running your mouth, you're going to get put in your place sometime, some point.
yeah,
That kind of goes back to that MMA, mixed martial arts, whatever mentality of, it was originally brought up with that respect factor.
yeah, yeah.
Um, Here's a question for you. Who was your hardest opponent?
Hmm. There's probably a couple of them. Of course, Edgar, because he was just always there, right? He was always there, no matter what you did. He
Sure.
kept
That's
coming, kept coming. Um, I fought this guy, Alexander Yakovlev, and uh, I remember Joe Silva like, yeah, we're gonna give you this guy. It should be an easy, like, it should be easy. Blah blah blah. 6'4", 155-pounder, southpaw, could
wow.
wrestle. Yeah, and I ended up just kind of overtraining and just the flu at the end of the camp, and that was one of those like fights to where I kind of wish I could take it back, but you know, um, other than that, I mean, there wasn't really a person who Diaz, of course.
Sure.
Um, he was one of those guys who was always there, always like high volume punching. And the two times I lost to him was the two times I wasn't mentally prepared to go 3 rounds or 5 rounds, you know, um, to deal like with his pressure. The one time I did beat him, you know, the whole camp, it was cardio, just knowing that I was prepared
Sure.
physically to where I could be there like upstairs, just mentally too, to where it's like I'm good. On the TV show, we had spotty training. It was really tough to train the way that we needed to train.
Well, also, there's no
Um,
film really, I imagine on the show, not as much as you would
yeah,
in normal training camp where,
yeah,
you might think like, hey, I know this Diaz guy is trained
yeah,
by, Cesar Gracie,
yeah,
but you don't know
yeah,
the level he's got.
yeah, yeah. No, we knew it. It just, I was on BJ Penn's team, and it just he was big on trying to teach a lot of technique, but he didn't really grasp how important it was because it was a training camp. That was pretty much the whole show is a training camp. You're fighting. You're not trying to learn, any technique. You're competing like every week. And
Sure.
and it was decent training, but not what I was um not how I was accustomed to it, you know. And so that was a tough one going in. And then when I fought him on the it was a main event card. I forgot. It was on a
The
TV
Ultimate
show.
Fighter
Like,
finale or whatever.
yeah, yeah. Just really didn't. There was a lot of stuff going on. Kind of personal stuff, like remodeling my house and trying to work on that, and trying to juggle a new baby, and just didn't really. He's and that's a compliment to him, man. You got to be prepared mentally, physically. You got to be ready to compete every second of the whole 3 rounds, 5 rounds, whatever it is.
And honestly, like my favorite fighter of all time is Nick and Nate Diaz. And I think everyone likes him. Like the reason they have this cult following is for the simple
Yeah,
fact that everybody wants to tell their boss, F you, give him the middle
yeah,
finger.
yeah,
They're two of the only guys that would actually do it. Like, Nate Diaz
yeah,
has the famous him slapping Dana White. And they're true to, who they are. But
yeah,
we heard, after Nick got suspended for 5 years for his like umpteenth failed marijuana test, but
yeah,
he was like, I didn't have kids because I wanted to fight. I need to be mentally prepared. So, and again, like you talked about, remodeling your house, juggling a new child, like that stuff. If you're not 100% laser focused, then
yeah,
kill or be killed.
yeah. You might be able to do that against another guy, but not the Diaz's. And I think the Diaz's are going to go down in history more than any other guys. Connor, anybody, just because they did stand up for what they believe in. They did you look at Ali,
Sure.
he couldn't compete for a long time just because, he didn't want to go to the army or he
Yeah.
didn't want to go to the war. He stood up for what he believed in, and I feel Nick and Nate, they're the same way.
Absolutely. And I don't know, like when Nate beat Connor, like I remember that night I was watching with my brother in his basement, and like I remember before the fights happened, and like I had a Fitbit on, and like my heart rate was like 130 sitting there because I was so stoked for the fight, man. And
Yeah.
like a lot of times, like I'm nowhere near these guys' level, but like it gets like me emotional is like watching these guys that like have just been there day in and day out, but they
Yeah.
haven't got their due yet. And I'm like, if he can knock off Conor, like this dude's going to get his payday and he's going to get everything that he deserved. And you always root for those kind of guys. You know, Conor was already there. He was already on, you know, the mountaintop. And when he did it, you're just like even though like, I wouldn't say Nate would ever say it's a dream come true, but that made him the rest of his life. You know what I mean? He was financially set. So it's that kind of stuff where I was just like so excited. Like, you know, when he won, it was definitely like one of my favorite MMA moments of like, you know, just watching.
You know, and it's crazy. He was making shit all the way up until that.
Yeah.
The dude would fucking scrap all the best, you know.
But I mean, Dana
on a show every time.
Dana he's not a needle mover like his brother. He can't move.
Yeah.
Well, you know what? I'm pretty sure he 1.7 million buys for him and Conor too.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, you might be wrong on that one, buddy.
Yeah.
Did Nate talk a lot in your guys' fights?
Yeah.
That's We'll end with this. Give me, you know, you can give me one or a few of your craziest stories that you've seen while in the fight game, whether it's a training camp, whether it was, you know, backstage before a fight. What's some like the craziest stuff you've seen?
Man. There's always crazy stuff going on.
I'm sure.
It's just hard for me to remember it all, right?
Sure.
Crazy stuff. You know, just being around Couture, kind of at the beginning of my career, he had me in his corner for the title fight against Tim Sylvia. That was pretty cool. You know, and then again when we were at the gym and he was going up against Dana and the UFC and in like all the legal battles, and he was trying to stand up, you know, for all of us. And just watching like everybody, Forrest Griffin, Pyle, Jay Huron, like all these guys. You know, I got Tyson Griffin, Mac Danzig, Stout. You know, all these guys trained at Extreme Couture, and just watching how everybody's career just kind of took shape, you know, and now kind of knowing them, it's just, you know, it's different. It's cool, and there's a million stories in all those, you know.
Sure.
And you know, I just really like wish that MMA fans would take more time to get to know like each of the individuals, you know, and what they're through, and you know, like a personal like aspect, because you know a lot of them are kind of, oh, you know, he's a dumb fighter, just get out there and fight, you know. And you know, he could just be out there because his mom's, you know, dying of cancer, and he's got to pay bills, and he's got a new kid on the way, and like you know, he's just trying to eke out a win just to pay for what he needs to pay until the next fight, you know. You know, I wish people would kind of get to know the guys a little bit more.
And like that's a really good point. You know, I right after the Tony Ferguson Justin Gaethje fight, I saw some people on comments and Twitter and stuff like that. You know, I saw someone's like, "Man, it was tough to watch Tony take that kind of beating," and someone's like, "I don't know, you know, why you're crying about this. That's what they signed up for. I love watching it. That's why I watch MMA." And I'm like, "No, man, like don't get me wrong, I'm not against watching someone get beat up, but I watch MMA for the beauty, man. I watch these guys because they're professionals. I watch, you know, you've Ryan Hall. Ryan Hall, if he gets a hold of your leg, it's probably night over. He did it to BJ Penn. BJ Penn, you know, the first ever American Pan Am champion. Like, you know, it's those kinds of, that's why I watch the sport, not to watch somebody like, you know, or the Anthony Smith was a good one. His teeth were falling out. I mean, you can argue maybe the coach should have thrown in the towel. Maybe the ref should have stopped it sooner. I kind of think, yeah, that probably would have been the best idea. Let him fight another day. But, you know, people are like, I love watching that. I don't want to watch anybody like
Yeah.
take a pounding when they're not going to come back and win. Um,
Yeah.
so it's interesting. And you mentioned the Randy Couture beating Tim Sylvia. That's another one of those MMA moments that are just like, because nobody, tell me one person who dislikes Randy Couture. One person.
Oh, yeah.
You
Yeah.
know what I mean?
He's the
Great
best.
guy. When he beat Tim Sylvia, because nobody was really a
Yeah.
Tim Sylvia fan, but when he
Yeah.
beat, you're just like, oh my God, he did it. You know, that
Yeah.
was such a cool moment. That was awesome.
Yeah. It was crazy. I got off the TV show and, you know, he was like, yeah, you're in my corner.
That's awesome. That's a really
Got
cool
to be in
moment.
the corner for probably one of the coolest ones. It was in
Absolutely.
Ohio and people were just going nuts. It was fun.
That's definitely awesome. Well, I want to, you know, honestly, from the bottom of my heart, I want to thank you for coming on. I know you're a busy guy. You don't have to do this. You know, I do appreciate you coming on. It was awesome to talk to you. You know,
Yeah.
it was really cool
Good
just
times, man.
growing up as a kid watching you fight. You know what I mean? It's just really cool
Yeah.
to hear and have a conversation with you.
Yeah. Appreciate it, bud.
Thanks for tuning in, guys, and make sure you click on the like and subscribe button, and I'll see you guys next time.